This is another declaration of Badiou's about mathematics, and it just really reiterates what I've been saying before. Scientific statements are accurately exposed in their entirety to general criticism, independently of the subject of enunciation, and in accordance with explicit norms that are accessible by right to whomsoever takes the trouble to grasp them. A truth whose normative construction gains resolute approval in the process of being shared is perhaps the only thing that demands nothing at all. I'd like to say all the rest is silence, but actually the rest is a lot of noise from Badiou after this. This is the important thing about not only this is the general declaration, but some of the specifics of set theory. Not only at the upper end does it produce infinite infinities in which whereby the infinite is rendered banal and just a number, but at the lower end too, it actually starts its count not with one, which was the foundation of Greek arithmetic, for instance, but it starts with zero. It starts with the empty set, and in fact, due to the various operations that late 19th century, early 20th century set theory performs, you build these infinities not out of ones, but out of nothing at all, out of the void that's formalized as the empty set. So at the lower end, the one does not exist. It's preceded by this void. Badiou, in his more philosophical and ontological moments, declares the void is the proper name of being. So we have zero at this end, in which is nothing, and thereby destroys the one and a form of God. God is all, God is a whole. No, set theory shows actually there is no consistent theory of totality at that end, and at the infinite end, neither is there a totality as well. The infinities just keep on going higher and higher in this boggling fashion. Now, as Badiou said in a 1999 interview, if my ontology is linked with mathematics, the theme of infinity is most important in that link. Because mathematics is the only rational thinking of infinity, the story of infinity has been marked by theological thinking for a long, long time. We must liberate this category from the theological conception, and mathematics is the unique means for doing so. We must think the infinity of situations without theological conceptions. It is possible only today, now, for us with mathematics, and this is why I often say one philosophical task is to be faithful to Cantor. But it's not just, even though mathematics is so crucial for Badiou, as I said before, there's three other procedures which he thinks of as absolutely essential to philosophy as well. This is part of his doctrine. He said one of the problems, for instance, in his sort of recapitulation of 20th century philosophy, both in what's commonly called continental and analytic varieties, he says the problem is that they severed one side, analytic philosophy, actually sutured itself too thoroughly to logic and mathematics, whereas the continental side sutured itself too thoroughly to art and history. What gets lost in this is the disparate simultaneity, or the tension between mathematics and for Badiou, I guess the essence of art would be something like poetry, is that both of these formations need to be thought together for something like a genuine philosophy to be possible. And that's also why love and politics are also in there for reasons I'm going to speak about in a minute. And so one of his criticisms of both analytic philosophy and why he turns so thoroughly to set theory and mathematics is he says, I want to undo the hegemony of Anglo-Saxon positivism on its own ground, and at the same time, by using mathematics in that way, he undoes the hegemony of continental philosophy in its thinking in basing itself so fundamentally upon art and history, and itself excluding mathematical thought as a kind of inferior or deficient form of thinking. So Badiou's magnum opus, 1988, it was published in French, I mentioned it before, it came out a few years ago in English translation, is Being an Event. The title shouldn't only alert you to other famous works of the 20th century, Heidegger's Being and Time and Sartre's Being and Nothingness. It doesn't only allude to a sort of genre of great metaphysical works, but also it's quite strict. Being and event. In Being an Event, I would say very, very schematically that being is presented by mathematics in some of the ways that I've been trying to outline, whereas the event is presented by something like art. And here Badiou turns to one of his favourite poets, the Frenchman Stéphane Mallarmé, and to think what an event might be. Why? Because one of the things that the 20th century mathematics and logic also discovered is that no system can be both complete and consistent. Even the most rigorously pursued foundational inquiries in mathematics are going to come up against a necessary incompleteness to say that the system is not yet finished. The system prohibits its own totalization, and it prohibits speaking about everything as if mathematics could simply be applied to everything. What's left in the gap? Something like the sorts of claims that art makes upon us, which are enigmatic, mysterious, take us somewhere else, even though we're not quite able to say propositionally or exhaust the artwork through infinite redescriptions of it. That's part of the reason why Badiou wants to say if mathematics thinks being something like art enables us to think the event. And what's an event? Something that ruptures with common sense, something that ruptures with not only common sense, also with the rationality of mathematics, that nonetheless has a claim that goes beyond any particular empirical situation or beyond any particular sociological distribution of persons. Now, this is something that he constantly reiterates. Yes, the ancient Greeks had their own, Sophocles' plays. They still matter to us today. The ancient Greek gods, they don't matter at all except as myth and as part of art. It's art that's the important thing. We know that Mount Olympus is just a little hill. No one lives there, but the artwork of the ancient Greeks, it still has a claim on us today, as do artworks from all over the world from very, very many different situations. How is it that they have that claim? Badiou wants to say that there's something around the event, i.e. something a little extra rational that's not for all that irrational, because these artworks also don't enforce any dogma or doctrine upon us. Rather, what they enforce upon us is an enigma that we have to continue to think through. And I hope that that's a very brief sort of summation, schematic operation. Being, on the one hand, thought by mathematics for Badiou and the event, this is why every philosopher has to take account of both maths and art simultaneously. Otherwise, something is going to be lost. Now, the other two, here's a good quote. I hope you've had time to read it. One of the reasons I have so many words on my overheads is so you can actually look at something and learn something while I'm talking to you. So hopefully this is enough noise for the real message, which is Badiou himself, to come through. Now, this is my favourite photo of Badiou's reading The Socialist Worker with torture, war and robbery as the headline, and he's laughing. Why is politics important? Because, of course, for Badiou, the problem of politics is the problem of the status of justice vis-a-vis collectives. He wants to say one of the problems, again, with a lot of so-called political philosophy, he repudiates the very possibility, in fact, that there is a political philosophy, because he wants to say that politics, in its moments of justice, these moments of justice are always, he says, explicitly communistic, explicitly egalitarian, and they only emerge in times of trouble and upheaval, when in fact when the world as it is, everything in the world as it is thrown into disarray and is once again unfounded. For Badiou, they're the sorts of moments of politics, and so the French Revolution. He's French, so the English Revolution. He doesn't mention it all to my knowledge, but the French Revolution, the Paris Commune, the Russian Revolution, and so on, all become key moments for him of instances of what political justice might look like. It's not, as he says, justice can't be defined. Equality is not an objective; it is its axiom. There is no politics bound to truth without the affirmation, an affirmation which can be neither be proved nor guaranteed of a universal capacity for political truth. And it's only in times of upheaval where every single received opinion is thrown into doubt and its status relativized, and no single entity is able to retotalize this upheaval, that you can see on his own grounds why he would call that the moment of justice. It's of course horrible when he says it's justice. It's not a pleasant experience, but this is also something to underline in Badiou. Nothing about freedom is pleasant. Nothing about what he's taught. He says even learning mathematics, it's hard work. It's horrible. It's terrible. Being in love, which I think we should probably get to now. Even being in love. What's important about love is not I love you, you love me. Isn't that beautiful? We're now in some sort of complementary harmony that's going to go on, in a utopic state forever. No. What's important about something like love love is it enables us to think, all of these processes together, think the difficulties of being in love are an integral part of being in love, and if you don't have those difficulties, the torments, the anxieties, the ruptures, the renewals, and so on, then you're not actually in love, you're in something else. So I guess this would be Badiou's moral homily about love. Have a really terrible time when you're in love with someone. You know that that's real. Why is it real? Because, and this comes back to a kind of his crazy mathematics, is that when you're in love, there's neither one of you nor two of you. Like, are you one or two? You can't decide. If you're simply one, then you've fused. It's no longer love. You've just become some weird unit. And if there's simply two of you, then there's no necessary relation between that two. And one of the things that Badiou wants to say is that love is one of those events in which there's neither one nor two, and you're constantly working out and having to return to the inner process, an ongoing process, in which you're so anxious, you're so divided, blah blah blah, and yet under that pressure, you're constantly forced to ask yourself, how do I go on in this situation? And that even when you feel you can't go on, you still need to continue to go on. This is one of his favourite quotes too from Samuel Beckett. I can't go on, I'll go on. I can't go on, I'll go on. I can't go on. Very important in love. Now, he also wants to say that, and you can see this in the way that he thinks about mathematics. He thinks of it as axiomatic and deductive, but he also thinks about love as axiomatic and deductive, and politics as axiomatic and deductive as well. You can see how I'd like to try and suggest that he uses the mathematics really to think about how to think about the other processes. In love, there's no real love, as he says, without a declaration, I love you. What the hell does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's, as he says, it's an assertion. It's an axiom. I love you. Now we're going to find out what that love really means. And he says it often ends with, you don't understand me. But that's really, and as he says, an exhausted version of the declaration of love. But it's that process, once again, the work, that's crucial to Badiou. That even being in love is a work of freedom, in which there's neither one nor two, and in fact, the very relationship to the other comes up as absolutely immanent and integral, and no one else can help you, if that makes sense. You can have models for all over the place, but actually you have to invent your response under pressure, as he says, under the fire of the event. This brings us to ethics, and Badiou's written a very slim, elegant volume called, strangely enough, Ethics, in which he says he doesn't really like the word, and one of the things he hates about a lot of philosophy today is its reduction to ethics and to moral philosophy, which he says is a diminution of philosophy's real tasks and of its real ambition. And he says that because he says in the end everything just gets reduced to these stupid well, I guess handbook questions like, or how to live, 12 easy ways, Alain, no, I won't say. And it says, ethics itself, as such, becomes a mode of non-thought. It becomes just another way in which one prosecutes one's refusal to continue to think. However, as he says, since ethics does also have a decent philosophical history and destiny too, he wants to reconfigure ethics, and he says what you can see here on the projector. He doesn't want to say that it's got nothing to do with abstract categories, man or human, right or law, the other. He wants to say those categories are established, inherited. In fact, in the terms I've been trying to offer, they're religious categories. And instead of that, let's refer everything back to its context. As he's very against human rights discourse in particular, because he thinks of it as a form of, I guess, a kind of a pleasure in the other's suffering as much as anything else. And he wants to say, so we don't act ethically because we feel something about an image or about a particular situation. Rather, we're caught up in one of the processes. Ethics is simply following a process to the end. There are four of these processes. If you're a scientist, for instance, maybe it will be ethical to kill animals. Maybe as part of following your the ethics of particular sorts of scientific process, for example, genetic testing on animals, maybe that to do the science properly, you have to go all the way to the end. And so there's a terroristic element in Badiou's philosophy, which I don't want to minimise either, and should also have been kind of implied by my relating to you of his enthusiasm for revolutionary moments. He wants to say, yes, I guess if you want to make an omelette, you have to crack a few eggs. That's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is the world as it is already murderous and terroristic, despite the humanitarian face that it tries to present to everyone. You can't pretend that murder and violence aren't going to be involved. And one way or another, murder and violence are going to be involved. Either you have the murder and violence being done as we do it now, maybe we can do murder and violence another way, in a just way. I don't want to overemphasize that, but he also doesn't want he doesn't want you to feel very pleased about yourself because you feel very good about those starving orphans, or the environment, or your conservatism with a good conscience. Because it's also, to return to the sci-fi aspect of it, I've already shown a little diagram. This is what a truth looks like for Badiou. It's perfectly perspicuous, as I'm sure you'll agree with me. In fact, I'm not going to try and explain this at all. I'm going to leave it up there. I can see people trying to write it down, so I'll leave it for a moment. But the points that I do want to talk about is that every truth for Badiou has to begin in an event. One will not change one's life unless something happens to one that is enigmatic and nonetheless somehow compelling, and one wants to decide to say, if that actually happened, if that compulsion on me is something more than just a phantasm, what would it mean for the world in which I'm in? And that's, I mentioned before St. Paul having a vision. The guy was on a donkey, he was in the middle of the desert, it's really hot, no wonder you'd see all sorts of things. The point is that for St. Paul decides, actually that was true, that did happen, a voice did speak to me, I have been persecuting, why have I been persecuting the Christians? Actually, there's something more in it. I don't know what that is, and I'm now going to find out. And so the trajectory after this event, hallucinatory, of no particular status, it disappears immediately. It doesn't necessarily mean anything other than the guy was just a little hot. Nonetheless, Saul decided, actually it did mean something, and I'm going to see what that meant. And so the rest of his life, and we have the documents today, some of the documents today, are in fact running around the Middle East, trying to write letters to people, convert people, inventing, as Badiou says explicitly, universalism itself. Whether you're Gentile or Jew, whether you're man or woman, all can be saved in this sort of proselytizing universal address. And I hope that was at least slightly clear. Everything starts with something that's undecidable, this event. It's undecidable what status it has. You decide, yes, that event was a real event. I'm going to name it. I'm going to become a Christian. In fact, I'm going to rename myself as well. I'm going to be Paul. You become a subject, and of course, when you become a subject, you're stuck in finitude in the little situation that you're in, taking it moment by moment, trying to work out what you ought to do. But in this process of working stuff out, actually, this may start to spread, and there's a becoming infamous, as Badiou wants to say, of this truth process. And now we have the Catholic Church and many other things as well, simply because this crazy guy Paul decided, in the middle of the Roman Empire, at its moment of its emergence, how could one little guy do this? But at the same time, and Badiou wants to say this as well, no truth can totalize itself. If that truth can be universal, but it can't be total. And that distinction is a very important distinction for Badiou. That's why all the truths have to be present at once, because they all have something, they all offer something about thought and about thinking and about acting that none of the others quite have. And if you're lacking one of them, then you're actually lacking something essential to the mix of what goes into making up humanity. I really hope I've explained that. Was clear. Now, this is the conclusion of my lecture, and here's just a select bibliography. I haven't added Logics of Worlds since it's just arrived, and I haven't had time, but that's just come out from Continuum 2009. Being an event, the first named one is really the magnum opus. It really is incredibly difficult but worth persisting with. All the others, The Centuries about the 20th Century is a very readable, polemical book. Conditions, a collection of essays, some technical, some more accessible on people like Rimbaud, Samuel Beckett, Lacan, and some other people. Ethics, very short book. very expensive, hardcover from Verso, big print, big margins, worth buying nonetheless. Handbook of Anesthetics is his Doctrine of Art. Infinite Thought, it's probably the most accessible collection of essays. Mesopolitics is just about various political, his assault on democracy and so on. Number and Numbers is an excellent introduction to 20th century mathematics and mathematical thinking. It's extremely clear, and I really recommend it. St. Paul I've been talking about very briefly. And underneath that I've listed some other, I don't know why Ashton is there under Barker and Feltham, so he is. The three major introductory books are the Jason Barker book, the Feltham book, and the Peter Hallward book. They're all really good, and so I would recommend those two. Probably the simplest and most accessible is the Jason Barker volume, just the introduction, so I do recommend you pick that up. Otherwise, the Praxis of Alain Badiou you can get free online, and so don't buy it. And Peter Hallward Think Again is a collection of essays by famous contemporary figures on Badiou himself. It's slightly technical too, but there's a range of things there. And I want to finish. I only recently found this out that Claude Shannon built this machine, it's like in a suitcase, and it has an on-off switch. When you turn it on, a hand comes out, turns itself off, and then the box shuts again. That's how I want to finish with that image. So thank you very much for listening.